Hi, my name is Liam. I'm 28. I live in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of Asheville, North Carolina. I work remotely as a UI/UX designer, mostly building website layouts and mobile app interfaces. It's not the flashiest job, but it keeps my fridge full and the lights on. Truthfully, I like the solitude. I moved here around 4 years ago and rented a modest two-bedroom house on the corner of a sleepy block. It's the kind of place with big oak trees, birdsong in the morning, and the same delivery guy dropping off mail like clockwork. Very routine. Very still. But this story isn't about my work or my house. It's about the woman next door. Her name is Elise. She lives in the house right beside mine, literally just one weathered wooden fence between our yards. I guess she's maybe 40, though I'm not great with ages. She carries herself like someone who's seen more than she says and rarely lets anyone in. For years we barely exchanged more than a wave. Maybe a short hi, if we both pulled into our driveways at the same time. Or a polite nod near the mailbox. That was the extent of it. She wasn't rude, just distant, the type of neighbor you never have a problem with but also never actually get to know. And that was fine. I was focused on my job, my little side projects, my string of dates that fizzled out, and my collection of neglected indoor plants. I figured Elise was just someone who valued her space. Lots of people do. Then something shifted. This all started about 2 months ago on a Thursday evening. It was one of those early spring nights when the air finally starts to feel soft again, cool but not cold. I just finished watering my plants out on the deck. Yeah, I know, plants, and I was about to head inside when I noticed her. Elise was sitting out in her backyard close to the fence in a plain chair. Alone. No book, no phone, no drink at first. Just sitting there staring out at nothing. So, unmoving. She looked frozen almost. I lingered, watching for a moment, not in a creepy way, but something about the scene didn't sit right. Usually when she was outside she had her earbuds in or was reading. She always seemed like someone who kept her thoughts locked away. But tonight she looked exposed. Quiet in a different way. That's when I saw the bottle. Red wine. Half empty. She poured another glass slowly, like her mind was running somewhere else entirely. That kind of distracted, heavy movement you only make when you're carrying something invisible and heavy. I don't know what made me speak up. Maybe it was just a gut thing. Or maybe I hated how alone she looked in that moment. I stepped to the edge of my deck and called out softly, "Everything okay over there?" She turned her head slowly. Her face wasn't angry or sad, just worn out. Her eyes looked distant, like she hadn't slept in days. We made eye contact for maybe 3 seconds. Then she gave me a small nod, stood up silently, and walked inside without saying a word. She left the bottle and her half-full glass behind on the patio table. I stood there for a bit, staring at the fence between our yards. I'd seen her take that exact walk 100 times, from the chair to her sliding glass door, but this time it felt different. Like I'd seen past the surface for the first time. A glimpse into something I'd never noticed before. I went inside, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Something in the way she moved, the silence, the whine, the glance, it stuck in my head. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't about attraction. It was something else. Something human. Something sad. The next day, I debated going over and checking on her. Just knock and say, "Hey, hope you're okay." But I didn't. I talked myself out of it. Thought it'd come off weird. I was just the guy next door after all. Saturday came. I saw her take the trash out. She didn't even glance my way. Sunday was the same. Hoodie on, headphones in, that same unreadable expression. But I kept thinking about Thursday night. That image of her alone, glass in hand, eyes somewhere far away. And I realized, after 4 years of living next to this woman, I didn't know a thing about her. Not really. Not yet. And that realization, it stayed with me. Exactly 5 nights later, something happened again. I remember the time clearly because I had just paused the show I was watching, some forgettable crime drama, and glanced at the clock before heading to the kitchen for a snack. It read 10:42 p.m. I hadn't even reached the fridge when I heard the knock. 3 soft knocks. Not hurried. Not aggressive. But also not casual. I froze. No one ever knocked on my door that late. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a second I debated ignoring it, but something about the sound felt intentional. I walked to the door, unlocked it, and when I opened it, my brain needed a second to catch up. Elise was standing there in the rain. She had on a gray hoodie soaked through. Her hair clung to her cheeks and forehead, dark with water. No makeup. Just her raw and quiet. Her eyes weren't red from tears exactly. More like from fatigue, deep, heavy, soul-deep exhaustion. She didn't say hello. Didn't even force a smile. She just looked at me and said, steady and soft, "Sorry to bother you." I didn't know who else to come to. That sentence alone threw me. We weren't friends. We barely spoke. She could have called anyone. A friend, a cab, a sibling. But she was standing on my porch in the rain late at night. Then she added, "My dad's in the hospital. He had a stroke." I blinked. My mind scrambled for a response. "Do you want to come in?" She gave a small nod and stepped through the doorway without another word. She stood just inside, dripping rainwater onto the doormat, clutching her phone like it was her last connection to something solid. She wasn't shaking, but her body was stiff, like every muscle was locked in place just to hold her upright. I handed her a towel and she took it quietly, dried her face, pushed her wet hair back behind her ears. She told me the hospital had called about 20 minutes ago. Her father had collapsed at home and a neighbor found him. Paramedics had rushed him in. He was alive but unconscious. The hospital was about half an hour away. She didn't want to drive alone. "I know it's late. I couldn't get in the car. I walked here." I didn't hesitate. "I'll drive you," I said, already reaching for my jacket and keys. Outside, the rain hadn't let up. A steady, silver sheet fell across the streets, making them look like glass under the streetlights. Inside the car, the wipers set a slow rhythm as we drove through the quiet roads. She didn't speak much. Mostly stared out the window. Every now and then she glanced at her phone. No new messages. After a few minutes of silence, I tapped into one of my playlists, soft instrumental music just enough to fill the quiet. She glanced at the dash. "That's from Arrival," she said. I nodded. "Yeah. One of my favorites." Her voice was quiet, but there was something personal in it. "Mine too. The music, it makes the silence feel heavier but honest." I looked at her for a second and replied, "Sometimes silence says more than the lines ever could." She didn't say anything, but I could tell the conversation meant something. It was the first real moment we'd shared, something deeper than a nod by the mailbox. We pulled into the hospital lot just before midnight. She asked me to stay in the car. "Just in case," she said. I told her I'd be right there if she needed anything. I watched her walk through the automatic doors, hoodie still damp, phone clutched tight in one hand. Her shoulders were slightly hunched like she was preparing for something she couldn't control. I stayed. Didn't even look at my phone. Just stared out at the parking lot, the overhead lights making watery reflections in the puddles. I didn't know why, but I knew I needed to be there. Not for recognition. Not to be anyone's hero. Just to be there. About half an hour later she came back out, hands stuffed in her pockets. She got into the car without a word, stared straight ahead for a moment. Then finally said, "He's stable. They don't know if he'll wake up, but he's stable." Her voice cracked slightly on the word wake. She paused, took a deep breath. I didn't think I'd cry, but I did. That's all she said. I didn't press. I just started the car and drove her home. When we got back, I walked her to her door. She turned, met my eyes and said quietly, "Thank you for driving. And for not asking a bunch of questions." I shrugged and replied, "Sometimes that's the best kind of help." She looked at me for a long second, not quite a smile but something close. And then, without another word, she went inside. Then she opened her door and slipped inside. I stood on her porch for a few seconds longer, listening to the soft sound of rain tapering off, before turning and heading home. Back on my couch, I tried to press play on my show again, but my attention kept slipping. My mind kept replaying the way Elise had looked standing in the rain, her voice when she said, "I didn't know who else to come to." 4 years of living next door, hundreds of passing greetings, dozens of nods across our driveways, and that was the first real moment we'd shared. Something about it lingered. It was a strange feeling low in my chest. Not loud but heavy. The feeling that something between us had shifted, even if I couldn't name what it was yet. The next few days felt oddly quiet. Since that night, since the drive, since the hospital, I hadn't seen Elise much. Her house stayed dark during the day, but sometimes I'd spot a faint kitchen light glowing well past midnight. No signs of her outside. No walks. No trash bins rolled out to the curb. It was like she'd disappeared into her home. And part of me started to wonder, had I overstepped by helping her? Did she regret coming to me? I tried to brush it off. We weren't close. She didn't owe me anything. But still, I couldn't stop thinking about her. About the quiet ache behind her words. And yeah, if I was honest, it wasn't just concern. I was curious. And maybe, a little more than curious. Then, one Wednesday afternoon, I was taking out the trash when I heard her door creak open behind me. I turned and saw her standing there. Sweatpants, oversized t-shirt, hair pulled back loosely. No makeup. She still looked tired but different. Calmer. There was something clearer in her face, like the fog had started to lift. She raised a hand in a small wave. "Hey," she said, almost tentative. "Do you want to come in for coffee?" I didn't even think about it. Sure. It was the first time I'd ever stepped inside her house. The space surprised me. It was warm, not just in temperature but in feeling. The kind of warmth that doesn't come from the heater. Soft lighting even during the day. A few candles flickered in the kitchen, the scent of cinnamon and cloves drifting through the air. Cozy. Personal. Books lined the walls, shelves packed with paperbacks, hardcovers, some with cracked spines like they'd been read over and over again. In the living room corner sat a vintage record player with a small stack of vinyls. Bowie, Joni Mitchell, Sufjan Stevens. I remember thinking, this doesn't fit the quiet woman I thought I knew. We sat at her small kitchen table. She poured coffee, no cream, no sugar. Just black and strong. For a few minutes we sipped in silence. Then she spoke. "I used to sit here with my husband," she said, tapping the table lightly with her fingertips. "We bought this house together 7 years ago. He died 5 years ago." Her voice was steady, matter-of-fact. Not dramatic. Just truth. I didn't say anything. Just listened. We were married 2 years. He had a heart attack. 36 years old. No warning. I came home from a weekend work trip and found him. Right here. In the kitchen. Collapsed. She paused, took another sip of coffee. Paramedics said he'd been gone for hours. There was nothing to say. No words that wouldn't feel small next to that kind of grief. So I stayed quiet. Then she added, "I stopped talking to my dad after that." I looked up. He called me weak. Said I was embarrassing the family for falling apart. Said I needed to move on. Be stronger. She let out a bitter little laugh. He told me no man would want a broken woman who didn't want kids. Then she stood, walked into the living room and returned with a photo in a wooden frame. She handed it to me. A stiff-looking man in a military uniform. No smile. Stern posture. Good soldier. Terrible father, she said simply. She sat back down. When I told him I didn't want children, not after losing Ben, he said I was selfish. Said I'd regret it. That no man would want someone like me. I looked down at the photo, then back at her. He sounds like a complete ass. The words came out before I could catch them. Her eyes widened slightly in surprise. Then she laughed. A real laugh. The first I'd ever heard from her. Yeah. He was. She leaned back in her chair, arms folded across her chest. For the first time she looked comfortable. "I didn't mean to dump all this on you," she said after a moment. You didn't run when I showed up the other night. Most people would have." I shook my head. It didn't feel like something to run from. There was a long pause. She glanced out the kitchen window. Her backyard was still damp from that morning's rain. A couple of robins pecked at the grass near the fence. "I used to think silence was strength," she said. "That keeping things locked up made me stronger. But now, I think it just makes me lonelier." That line stuck in my head. Still does. We didn't say much after that. We just sat there in that kind of silence that doesn't feel awkward, just present. Sure. Before I left, she asked if I could help carry a box of books down to the basement. I said yes, and we did it without a word. She thanked me, saying she hadn't touched that box since the funeral. At the door I paused and asked, "You okay?" She met my gaze. "Today I think I might be." That night, back at my apartment, I didn't turn on the TV or scroll through my phone. I just sat there thinking about the way her voice sounded when she said that. About how many times I'd walked past her, nodded politely, and never once wondered who she really was. I'd lived next to Liana for 4 years. And in one single afternoon, I learned more about her than in all those years combined. It wasn't some cinematic moment. We didn't hug. We didn't flirt. We didn't suddenly become best friends. But something shifted. A door between us opened that hadn't been there before. And I knew if she ever asked me to come back, I would, no hesitation. It's strange how quickly the ordinary can start to feel different. A week after that kitchen conversation, I got a text from an unknown number while finishing a work call. It was short. "Meti. If you're free, the backyard's open. Liana." No emojis. No punctuation. Just her, direct, unadorned. I grabbed a jacket and walked over without a second thought. Her backyard was simple. A worn wooden table, 2 mismatched chairs, and garden beds that looked like they hadn't seen love in a while. The air smelled faintly of mint and rosemary. A single candle flickered at the table's center. One of those thick, handmade kinds, probably from a small local boutique. She was already seated when I stepped through the gate. "Hey," she said, voice softer than usual. I nodded and sat down across from her. She poured chamomile tea from a glass kettle, no sugar, no lemon. Just warm, clean. We didn't dive into anything deep. That wasn't her way, and I didn't try to change that. We talked about the weather. Her basil that refused to grow this year. My failed attempt at assembling a standing desk. Somewhere between the quiet and the tea, though, something softened. She started to open up, slowly but without holding back. Like she didn't need to keep her guard up anymore. Like the wooden fence between our houses had become irrelevant. She told me about the garden. He planted all this, she said, motioning to the beds behind us. We used to sit here every Saturday. He drank terrible coffee. I drank tea. We argued about music. She smiled, but it was a heavy smile, like a memory too fragile to hold with bare hands. He was a terrible gardener, she laughed. But he loved trying. That rosemary bush over there? He once sat on it by accident. Killed the whole thing. I still tease him about it when I come out here. She went quiet after that. I didn't speak. She didn't need comfort, just space. Then she said something that made me sit up a little. You know, I thought I'd be one of those women who remarries quickly. Like in the novels. Cry, heal, move on. But I just stopped. She looked down at her tea, then back up. People say time heals, but they don't mention how it makes you forget what closeness feels like. After a while, it feels like maybe you're not supposed to have it again. I wanted to say something meaningful. Anything honest. I think closeness doesn't vanish, I said. It just changes shape. Goes quiet for a while. She looked at me. Really? Then added, you're not like most people I know. That's probably a good thing. I smiled. She laughed, really laughed, and it caught me off guard. Not because it was loud, but because it felt alive. Raw. Then came the kind of silence that felt full, not empty. She got up and came back with 2 glasses of red wine. Don't get excited, she said. It's from the gas station. Perfect, I replied. We clinked glasses. We talked more that night than we had in the past month combined. Nothing dramatic. Just real. I told her about my last relationship, how it ended not with a fight but with silence. She told me about moving to Ash Grove after her husband died. How she almost sold the house but couldn't yet let go of the memories. Everyone says move on, she said, but no one tells you where exactly you're supposed to go. As the sky grew darker, so did the topics. She asked if I ever felt lonely working from home. I asked if she ever felt invisible in her own street. Yes, she said. So did I. At some point, I noticed her chair had shifted just slightly closer to mine. Not dramatically, just enough. And then came the moment I'd never forget. She looked at me, set her wine down, and said, You know what's funny? You lived right over there for 4 years, and all I thought was, that's the guy with the headphones. I raised an eyebrow. And you, I replied, were the woman with a dozen delivery boxes and a cat that never showed up. She smiled. I don't even have a cat. Exactly. We laughed. Then, softer, she said, I like this. Talking. I forgot what that felt like. Me too. No touching. No flirting. No soundtrack swelling in the background. Just 2 people under string lights, sharing silence and stories that somehow mattered again. I left when the candle was half burnt. She walked me to the gate and we just looked at each other for a long second. No promises. No, see you tomorrow. Just enough. Back home, I realized how strange it all was. I'd spent years trying to impress women who barely remembered my name. And now here I was, thinking about a quiet, grieving woman next door with gas station wine and a laugh that felt like home. And it felt more real than anything I'd known in years. I spent months pretending everything was fine, just to avoid the moment when it wouldn't be. Sienna told me about her move to Clearwater Bay, about how she almost sold the house after her husband passed, but decided to stay, because she wasn't ready to let go of the memories just yet. Everyone tells you to move on, she said, but no one tells you where exactly you're supposed to go. As the sky turned a deeper blue and the streetlights buzzed to life, we drifted into heavier topics without realizing it. She asked me if I ever felt lonely working from home. I asked her if she ever felt invisible in her own neighborhood. She paused, then whispered, yes. So did I. At one point, I noticed she'd moved her chair just a little closer to mine. Not a big shift, but enough to erase the distance between neighbors and people who were starting to see each other. Then came a moment I know I won't forget. She looked at me, set her glass down, and said, You know what's funny? You lived across the street for 4 years and I always thought of you as the guy with the headphones. I raised an eyebrow. And you were the woman with all the delivery boxes and the dog I never saw. She smiled. I don't even have a dog. Exactly. We both laughed. Then she said quietly, I like this. Talking. I forgot what that felt like. I nodded. Me too. We didn't touch. We didn't flirt. There was no soft background music. Just two people at a wooden table beneath a string of warm lights, sharing stories in silence like they meant something again. I left that night when the candle had burned down halfway. She walked me to the front gate. We just looked at each other a moment before saying goodnight. No promises. No, see you tomorrow. Just enough. Back in my house, I realized something. I'd spent years trying to date the right person, trying to impress women who forgot my name by the next day. And here I was thinking about a quiet, grieving woman across the street who poured cheap wine into chipped glasses and laughed like it had been locked away for years. And somehow, it felt more real than anything I'd had in a long time. It was a still Saturday morning. The sky was overcast and the street was quiet. No kids biking, no joggers, no lawnmowers. That kind of silence that makes you feel like time hasn't started yet. I was at my desk, halfway through a draft for a client. My coffee was cooling beside me. Music hummed low from the speaker. Then 3 soft knocks on the door. 7:13 a.m. I already knew it was her. Sienna stood there in the same clothes from the night before, jeans, a slouchy sweater, her hair in a loose braid. But something had shifted. Her face was pale, her expression blank. In her hands she held a brown envelope. My dad passed away this morning, she said. No tears. No flinch. Just a fact not yet fully absorbed. I opened the door wider. Come in. She stepped in and sat on the edge of my couch, still holding the envelope. They called at 4:30. Said he was stable last night. Said I didn't need to come in. Then they called again 2 hours later. She paused. He didn't wake up. I sat across from her. Waited. I never really got to say anything. Not properly. But I saw him last week. Sat with him for an hour. Told him I forgave him. Told him I didn't hate him. She extended the envelope toward me. What is it? I asked. His stuff. Documents, ID, a photo of my mom. A letter addressed to me. She pulled it back to her lap. I haven't opened it yet. I'm not ready. I nodded. Didn't press. We sat in silence for a while. The kind that carries weight, not tension. I don't know why I came here, she said eventually. I didn't want to be alone. But I didn't want to be with anyone else either. I stood, poured us both fresh coffee and handed her a cup. She held it like it might warm something deeper than her hands. Do you want me to drive you to the hospital later? She shook her head. Already signed everything. They're keeping him in cold storage until Monday. I'll make arrangements then. She looked tired but focused, like her mind was already 5 steps ahead, sorting logistics, making decisions. But then she surprised me. I need to get away from here for a few days, she said. I was thinking of heading to the coast. Driftwood Cove or maybe Haven Point. I nodded. Sounds like a good idea. She took a sip. Would you come with me? I studied her face for a second. She was steady. Come. You don't have to, she added. I'm not asking for anything dramatic. I want to share this part of my life with someone who didn't know my dad. Someone who doesn't carry all the history. There was something raw and honest about the way she said it. No performance. No hidden meaning. Just a human asking for presence. I told her yes. That afternoon we drove west. No bags, no plan. Just 2 tired people in quiet clothes with the windows cracked and the music soft. The ocean was gray when we got there. The wind was cold but cleansing, the kind of sharp air that pushes grief out of your chest just long enough to breathe again. We stayed 2 nights. Walked along the shore. Ate gas station sandwiches. Slept in separate rooms at a weathered little motel with squeaky floors and faded curtains. We didn't talk much about her father. Or her husband. Instead we talked about movies. Our childhoods. Her first time driving. The time I accidentally shipped 200 water bottles to the wrong state. She laughed. Not loudly. But for real. On the second night she handed me the letter. I'm ready, she said. But I don't want to read it alone. We sat on the edge of her bed. She opened it. It was short. An apology with no excuses. Regret without specifics. I didn't know how to be a father. I loved you. I just didn't know how to show it. She folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope and rested her head on my shoulder. We stayed like that a long time. When we returned home, something between us had shifted. Not in a movie-ending kind of way, no swelling music, no passionate embrace. Just something deeper. Steadier. Trust. She started inviting me over more often. Sometimes just to sit on the porch. Sometimes to help with dinner. I helped her clear out the basement. She helped me repot the dying herbs in my backyard. One evening she asked if I could help her fix the fence between our yards. Sure, I said. While we worked, she smirked. Funny how we're fixing a fence we don't really need anymore. I smiled. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. We didn't become a couple. Not officially. There was no grand kiss, no confessions of love. But there was something better. A quiet companionship. Months later, I bought a small house 2 blocks away. She helped me move. We still see each other all the time. Dinners, coffee, long walks without phones. Sometimes people ask how we met. I just say, she was my neighbor for years. But I didn't really know her until that one day. And I mean it. Because that's the truth.